Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a really fun embossing folder technique that I put a bit of my own twist on. I learned about this technique from one of my card making buddies, Sandy, and I will link to her video in the description box below this one because she was inspired by someone else. It's like it's like a game of telephone, you know? It's who came up with it first. But anyway, Sandy had posted her video a couple months ago. I forget when it was, and I was like, this is amazing. And then I never got a chance to do it. And then I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, I wonder if instead of black, I tried it with gray. I was curious. So I started off with, this is just some media grip from Tim Holtz. I'll have a link to this. Because Simon Says Stamps sells it in a pack with the Simon folders to store it. I've cut it down. Tim's done an entire video on media grip and all the things about it. I was just using it to hold my cardstock in place while I do some blending. And while I pulled it out, I was like, oh, this works to hold ink pads too. So set out my media grip. And then I have 3 colors of Simon's Pawsitively saturated inks. I have Sunbeam, Peony, and Ocean. And just a couple of A2 sized panels of Simon's smooth white cardstock. And I am going to do very quick, very easy color application. I don't even want to call it a color blend because I ain't blending nothing. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to get some color down. And the fun thing about choosing 3 colors like this is as the colors overlap, you'll get the rainbow of colors because, you know, the pink and the yellow will make orange. The yellow and the blue color will make some green. The pink and the blue will make purple. And if you mix all 3 together, you get mud, but a little bit of that ain't going to hurt anything. So I use just blending brushes. And like I said, I'm just slapping on the color. Not worried about it too much. And doing more than one because why not? And that's also the fun thing about this is even though I'm doing more than one and I'm doing the exact same thing and using the exact same colors and in practically the exact same spots, they're still going to look different. Like, I love it. That's one of my favorite things sometimes when, you know, making multiples, when depending on the technique and certain things, things turn out differently, and that just makes it fun for me anyway. So I just use my blending brushes. And like you can see, just slapping on the color. These do, like Simon's inks do smooth out more as they dry, which actually comes into play with the rest of the technique. But yeah, the first part, you just need to get color down. That's all that matters. So I got the color on my panels. Now I'm going to use an embossing folder. One of my favorites. This is the Peony bundle embossing folder. And I have done many, many, many videos using embossing folders. I will actually have a link. I took a big chunk of my day and put a playlist together with all the videos I've done over the last however many years using embossing folders. So I'll have a link to that at the end. But this I haven't done yet. Adding ink directly to embossing folders, I'm positive. I don't think I've ever done this, but I've known about it. Anyway, it can get a little finicky because the plastic of the embossing folders doesn't want to take ink. I will say I did rub this embossing folder, the insides, really, really well with just some rubbing alcohol, just, you know, to try and make it work better. And you just apply the ink to the side of the embossing folder that has the image or pattern indented into it, as you can see. And I used Simon's charcoal ink, and I used a brayer. I had kind of applied it first with just the ink pad, very, very lightly, and then I went over the brayer to kind of smooth it out, and then I ran it through my die cut machine. And the first pass, not the greatest, but I wasn't expecting it to be perfect because, again, 1, I'm working with a lighter ink, and 2, I'm applying ink to embossing folder plastic, you know? So I did it a second time and ran it through my die cut machine a second time. And you just need any die cut machine, you know, that you use is going to be fine. Just follow the instructions with the embossing folder. It's on, you know, Simon's website. It says all the different sandwich options, you know, use what works for you. And for me, it's a Platinum 6 machine with the base original platform and 2 metal shims. That's what I've shown in all my videos. So after I did that, there were still a few spots, that missed, that didn't work with the gray ink. Like it just, the cardstock, it just didn't get pressed in the cardstock. So to fix that, I just took one of my itty bitty waffle flower brushes, the little tiny shader 0 brush, and filled in those spots. Right now, again, it looks like a hot mess. You can see the spots where I've added the ink with the brushes and whatnot. That's fine. It's going to smooth out. It literally will make a difference when it's dry. It still looks a little blotchy and things, but it will look fine. So, and I legit, this was my very first attempt doing this. I was like, I'll just turn the camera on. If it doesn't work, I can delete the footage and no one's ever going to know. But it worked. I was super happy. So again, this will look different depending on what inks you use, what colors you're using, whether you use gray like this or a black ink or a different brand. Like I was going to try archival ink for like this step, because that would probably work really well. Because like archival will kind of stick to non-paper surfaces, but down the road, just got to experiment a bit more. So I did the exact same thing the second time. I applied the ink lightly with the ink pad onto the embossing folder and then used the brayer. The brayer is just for kind of smoothing the ink out a bit, because when you tap it with your ink pad, it leaves like a ton of blotchy little lines and streaks and whatnot, and that will show up on the cardstock. So you can see I'm just tapping, then I just take the brayer and kind of smooth that out a bit. And I'd done it once, and then it's easy to just fit that cardstock back where it's supposed to be. Ran it through a second time, and the second layers just really worked. And then again, just took my little blending brush and just kind of filled in a few spots. Again, doesn't need to be perfect, but just cleaned it up. I let it dry, and already a huge difference. And the one thing I was really liking about how this gray turned out is the colors underneath still show through a bit. So that's really fun. But if you did black, it is intense. Like again, link to Sandy's video will be below in the description box below. You can check it out. When you do black with this, it just makes the colors like explode, and I love it. And then she added gold, and it was amazing. And I was like, this is the best technique ever. Anyway, one thing at a time. Back to this. Splatter. Even if you're not 100% happy with it, add some splatter. Walk away. Come back. Splatter fixes everything. As is tradition, you all know, this is one of the rules. So my first bit of splatter was perfect pearl powder, of course, mixed with a little bit of water and my fan brush. Splattered that heavily onto these because shimmer, hello. So I did that first, cleaned off my brush, and then I'm going to add a bit of black splatter with black soot distress paint. So shook that up really well, put that on my palette, wiped off my brush, and then like I always say, especially with black soot, immediately clean your brush, your tools. Do not let that paint dry. It's permanent, like permanent. Clean your tools after you're done with it. So did my splatter with that as well, and then washed out my brush, wiped off my palette. Things are good. So I've got these fun, super bright backgrounds. Now we got to add some sentiments. And I just haven't bothered putting away. This has been in many recent videos. This is Simon's Greetings Mix 2 stamp set. Like, look at it. There's so many sentiments in here. It's perfect. Like, I legit haven't been bothering to put it away lately because I'm like, oop, there's a sentiment I can use. Oop, there's a sentiment. So I grabbed a scrap of black cardstock, anti-static powder tool on there. I stamped the thank you sentiment from the set with clear embossing ink, coated it with detail white embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool. Then I removed the excess anti-static powder with one of my little microfiber cloths. Then I die cut these with one of Simon's nested circle wafer dies. So just tape that into place with some washi tape so the die doesn't shift when I run it through my little machine. And then I decided, I was like, should I have bling? What kind of embellishments? And I was like, of course, the flickering butterflies die set. This one has made, I could do a playlist of this one too. That one would take a while just to like hunt through all. I've done so many cards using this die set. Like, it's a must have, honestly. You guys have seen me use it with vellum, with shimmer vellum, with cardstock, like foil cards, glitter cardstock, everything. You know, you can't go wrong with tiny little butterflies. They're perfect. So this time I just took scraps of white cardstock, did the exact same thing I did at the beginning, applying the same 3 inks, just slapping them on with the blending brushes. Not worried about getting a blend or anything. Just need to get color onto this. The color will smooth out as it dries. The layers will create other colors. So I've got little scraps basically of a rainbow of colors. So I applied that to these scraps of cardstock. After I get all of the inks on, and again, same exact 3 inks, Ocean, Sunbeam, and Peony. And once I got the inks on, wiped up my work surface, of course, let them dry for a minute or 2. It doesn't need to dry. This part is irrelevant, but let them dry for a minute or 2. And then I'm going to throw these in my splat box. And this time I'm going to use my little mini mister. I've shown this in a bunch of videos. This is just a mini mister with some perfect pearl powder and water in it. There's no formula. I just put a couple little tiny scoops in there till I'm happy with it. The only thing you got to remember to do is shake it up really, really, really well every time you go to use it, because the powder will settle in the bottom of the container. So shake it up really well. And then I just mist that over these, and they're going to be shimmery and beautiful and love. So did that. Let that dry for just a little bit, and then I die cut them with that Flickering Butterflies wafer die, which I'll come back to in a second. And then for my card bases, these are going to be top folding A2 white note cards. So I put them in one of my mini misties, and I'm stamping more sentiments from that same Greeting Mix 2 stamp set. So the main kind of inner sentiment I stamped with that charcoal ink. So stamped that, and then lined up another little sentiment from that set, and that I'm going to stamp with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. So I've got like the gray ink for the main part of the sentiment, and then the little like companion sentiment with black ink. So stamp that, and then to bring some color onto the inside of the cards, that's what the Flickering Butterflies are for. So before I get to that though, I decided to trim down those panels. They were originally A2 sized, and I trimmed these down to about 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Yeah, that would have been about it. So I just used my trimmer and trim these down to make them smaller than the card base. And then I also trimmed some black cardstock off camera to just slightly larger. So it was like just slightly larger. Don't ask me for measurements on that. My brain is just like, no. Anyway, on the inside of the cards, some of these little butterflies, because I was like, oh, the outside's going to be so colorful and the inside needs a bit of color too. So got my little tray here with all of the die cut butterflies. And I've talked about this before too, with this die set, and same with all my other little like hearts and stars and those little, wafer die sets. I keep all the extras and I just throw them right back in the packaging with the wafer die, so that every time I go to, pull it out, it's like I have just a plethora of all little embellishments that I have die cut. It doesn't take up any extra space really, and it's just perfect. And honestly, sometimes it's kind of fun to just like upend the little envelope with the wafer die, and then it's like, oh, I've just got like a little pile of butterflies falling out. So anyway, adhered those to the inside of the card. And then for the outside, like I said, I cut some black cardstock slightly larger than these embossed panels. So I adhered those together with craft tacky glue. And then my thank you sentiments that I had die cut with circle wafer dies. Those I'm going to pop up with just some thin foam squares to give it just a little bit of dimension. I decided with these to keep, like, dimension just wasn't necessary. Like, you totally could add foam tape and layers and yada, yada, yada. That looks awesome always. But just with these, I was like, it's not necessary. Don't need it. There's so much going on with the color, and I got splatter and I got shimmer and the, raised embossing from the embossing folder. Oh, love. I love embossing folders. I didn't even realize until I actually started putting all the videos into a playlist how many I've done in the last few years using embossing folders. There's several dozen videos. So anyway, adhered the sentiments and then adhered those card fronts to the card bases, and then decided to add a few of those little shimmery butterflies to the card fronts as well, because of course there would be little shimmery butterflies flying around, these rainbows of flowers. So once I was kind of happy with the placement, I adhered those into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue as well. And then once I get those adhered, I'm going to pair these cards with black envelopes. I've mentioned this before. I love doing things like really bright, super colorful cards and then like black envelopes, you know, so that the person has no clue. And then they open it up and it's like just color, you know, love it. And of course I'll turn on my flashlight so you guys can see the shimmer because it's amazing. So like I mentioned, I'll have a link to that playlist at the end of this video. I will link to Sandy's video in the description box below. And in the description box below, I will also link to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I use. So if you want to check any of that out, just expand the description box below the video and it's all going to be there for you. And then, yeah, embossing folder playlist at the end of this video. And you can just click on that and yeah, dozens of videos. And yeah, as always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting. It legit helps. It tells those robot overlords that run the algorithms that literally run my entire life that you guys like what you see. So I very much appreciate it. And subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And yeah, thank you guys so very much. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.